Did you know that some Viking battles were so fierce they changed the course of history? Vikings didn't just raid villages, they battled entire kingdoms to the ground. Using their wit and incredible tactics, they were pretty unstoppable. In this video, we're gonna learn all about some of these legendary battles and the reason for the Vikings' success. From the invasion of Lindisfarne to the epic siege of Paris, you're in for a ride. The Vikings made a big name for themselves across Europe, moving from England to Ireland, and even as far as France. Their daring raids earned them a reputation for both fear and respect, and nobody wanted to mess with them. The majority of Viking battles and raids started out in England. Thanks to their expert sailing and incredible tactics, the Vikings went about conquering, and by so doing, they established the Viking Age. One of the battles they fought and won is the Battle of Maldon. In 991, during the reign of King Ethelred the Unready, the Vikings, who went quiet for a while, started raiding England again. This time they came with full force, and the Anglo-Saxons faced a tough challenge. Some people thought that the best solution was to pay the Vikings to leave them alone, but some others disagreed, believing they should fight back against the Viking attacks. Bertnot, a royal official from Essex, was one of those who wanted to fight. He gathered up his soldiers to face the Vikings, who had sailed up the Blackwater River and ended up on a small piece of land. Although the Vikings were at a disadvantage there, Bertnot didn't fight them there. He wanted a fair fight, so he allowed them to cross onto the mainland. The battle was fierce, and despite his bravery and sense of honor, Bertnot was killed, while his troops were defeated. After this loss, the English decided to pay Danegeld to the Vikings in order to prevent more attacks. Speaking about attacks, the next battle was about nothing but attacks. It is the Battle of Assandun. Before the famous Battle of Hastings in 1066, there was another major battle in 1016 called the Battle of Assandun. This battle was just as dramatic, with a foreign force invading England, overthrowing the rulers, and setting up a new Viking dynasty. This line of Viking kings, however, lasted only a short time. Just 50 years later, William the Conqueror took over. The English leader at the Battle of Assandun was Edmund Ironside, the son of King Ethelred the Unready. Ethelred had been forced into exile by Vikings earlier, but he came back to try to reclaim his throne. This led to a serious struggle for control between the Anglo-Saxon rulers and a Viking challenger, Canute the Great. The two armies met at Assandun in October 1016, where Edmund was defeated. After the battle, Edmund and Canute agreed to divide England between them, but when Edmund died just a few weeks later, Canute became the sole ruler, establishing himself as the Viking King of England. But the Vikings weren't only going for England. There was also the Siege of Paris, 885 to 886 AD. While many people know about the Vikings in England, their epic attack on Paris in 885 to 886 AD was also incredible. It all started when a huge Viking army, led by chieftains Siegfried and Rollo, tried to capture Paris to take its riches. Although they broke through the city's first defenses, Paris just wouldn't give up easily. Count Odo of Paris led the city's defense, and even though the Vikings outnumbered his forces, Odo was determined to protect Paris. Initially, leaders like Rollo and Siegfried had asked to sail up the Seine River without a fight, but Paris's leaders, Odo and Goslin, refused. This led to an intense battle on November 26th, where Parisians and Vikings fought desperately near the city towers. After hours of serious fighting, the Vikings had to retreat, but they achieved one goal before pulling back. They had weakened the tower's base, but couldn't break through. As winter set in, climatic conditions got worse, with constant rain making life miserable for the Vikings camped outside the city. Then, one night in February, the Seine River rose up to the brim because the rain flooded it, causing the Petit Pont Bridge to collapse. Seizing the chance, the Vikings attacked the next day. Only a dozen brave defenders were at the tower, which the Vikings targeted with a fire-starting tactic. And they succeeded. With the bridge gone, Earl Siegfried led more Vikings up the river, while Rollo was only determined to take control of Paris. Inside the walls of Paris, things got even worse as a plague broke out, adding to the hardships and claiming many lives. In October 886, as Paris continued to hold off the Viking siege, King Charles the Fat arrived with a large army from various places. The people of Paris, who had been defending their city, were excited and hoping for a decisive battle. Surprisingly, though, King Charles negotiated with the Viking leaders instead of fighting. King Charles offered Rollo 700 pounds of silver to be shared with Siegfried in order to end the siege and leave Paris. The Vikings accepted and spent the next few months raiding in Burgundy, although they failed to take the city of Sens. Later in 886, Rollo and Siegfried came back to Paris, and true to his word, King Charles paid the silver. The Vikings finally left Paris. Siegfried went to Friesland, where he later died in a battle, while Rollo ended up with a favorable agreement from the negotiations. Despite the Vikings' insane fighting skills, the Vikings didn't always win. One battle that quickly comes to mind is the Battle of Edington in 878 AD. This battle was one of the major defeats the Vikings faced. In the bigger picture, it helped stop their advance in England and set the stage for the future Kingdom of England. King Alfred the Great was ruling over Wessex, the last English kingdom that had not been conquered by Vikings at the time. He went up against a strong Viking leader named Guthrum. Although Alfred's troops were smaller, they won a very important victory because the outcome of that battle changed the course of history forever. After the battle, the Treaty of Wedmore was signed, and Guthrum agreed to become a Christian. This treaty drew a clear line between the Viking-controlled area known as Danelaw and the Anglo-Saxon parts of England. It was a big step towards bringing the different parts of England together into one united kingdom. This battle was indeed a crazy one, but it wasn't as significant as the next one. This is the one you absolutely cannot miss. This is the Battle of Stamford Bridge. This battle started because of a very big problem in England at the time. King Edward the Confessor died in 1066 without leaving an heir, and there were many rumors about who he wanted as his successor. Harold Godwinson, King Edward's brother-in-law and the Earl of Wessex, quickly became one of the top candidates for the throne. But there was a little problem. Edward had spent much of his early life in Normandy and had close ties there with William of Normandy, his distant cousin. William claimed that Edward and Harold had promised him the throne long before Edward's death, a claim which Harold's supporters rejected. These disagreements led to the many events of 1066. Harold was crowned king, but this angered two other strong contenders, William of Normandy and Harold Hardrada, a terrifying Viking leader. What happened next? King Harold decided to invade England, catching the local defenders by surprise with his strong Viking force. But little did he know, he'd soon receive the same treatment. Seeing the threat after the Vikings' victory, King Harold of England quickly gathered an incredible army of 15,000 men in just 2 days. To add to the tension, Harold's brother, Tostig Godwinson, had joined the Vikings, bringing even more warriors with him to fight against his brother. King Harold didn't waste a single moment. He led his foot-soldiered army across 185 miles in just 4 days to meet the Vikings. The Vikings didn't see it coming. They only realized Harold's army was near when they saw them charging towards their camp. The English took full advantage of the surprise, launching a swift and fierce attack directly into the Viking camp. This decisive battle took place at Stamford Bridge, just 6 days after the Vikings had won at Fulford. King Harold led his forces to a huge victory that day. The battle was a very tough and fierce fight, and sadly, Harold Hardrada and Tostig Godwinson both died. Harold was fatally hit by an arrow in the throat because the Vikings had left their armor on their ships. Tostig, on the other hand, turned down a peace offer from Harold and chose to keep fighting, especially when Viking reinforcements arrived. But these reinforcements were tired from their journey and also got defeated, with Tostig among those who died. Only a few Vikings survived and managed to escape using just 24 ships from the original fleet of 300 to return to Norway. But this battle stands out because it is often seen as the end of the Viking Age. King Harold won impressively, but it cost him a third of his army. With no time to rest, he quickly led his remaining troops south to face Duke William of Normandy. Of course, Harold lost, and William's victory made him known as William the Conqueror.